Welcome to another story of a journey to divine love. We are LightBringers. Today is Monday, April 5th, and Brooke Folk is our guest. With me today is Beth. Oh, and I'm Lorraine Borchers in Bend, Oregon, which is on the west coast of the USA.
Yes, as Lorraine says, I'm Beth and I'm from the UK in a county called Lincolnshire. So before we start, shall we have a prayer?
Okay.
Heavenly Father, we know that you are always with us and you're waiting for us to reach out to you. Please may we receive your divine love as we seek to connect to your great soul. Thank you for bringing us together today. Bless Brooke as he shares his faith journey with us. And may whatever we do today, Lord, be for your glory. We love you, dear Father. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Beth. So, Brooke, whenever you'd like to introduce yourself and give a brief history of your journey, then Beth and I will chime in with our questions. And I want to note that I'm getting a message that my internet's unstable, so it might be up to you two to carry on.
To all, and thank you for the invitation to be a part of this audio and visual representation of my faith journey and the divine love path. My name is Brooke Folk, and I'm here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and we'll narrow that down to a little community called Sale, Pennsylvania, of which I was born and raised up until about 18, 19 years old, and then I went out and spread my oats, as they say, in the physical part of life. And that took me to a community. Yes. Welcome to you too. Yes, this is live. And in my background, I've come across all kinds of combative issues in getting my story told. Since I have been an interviewer of many hundreds, if not thousands of people, it has been and very few that I have been interviewed, maybe 3 times in my lifetime, and I've given thousands. And the reason that is because my career has been in radio, and that's what took me from my hometown into a community not far away, introduced to radio, and within 2 years able to go to another community 50 miles away and start another radio news station. And from there, 7 years later, migrated back to New York. And why New York? That's where my marriage took me. My wife is from a little community much larger than what I was used to, but Deer Park, Long Island. So I spent 40 years there. And I equate that as years like Moses, wandering around 40 years and many different keeping radio always in the background along with my own business. And for 40 years, I wandered in the desert, and then circumstances led me in 2013 to make a momentous decision of doing what I always thought I would do, and that was one day returning back home to my beloved community of Myersdale, Pennsylvania. And in hindsight, I can see steps along my many years of leading me to such a decision. And that decision has become even beyond my reasonable assumptions of what I would be doing when I returned home. Still being able, with the internet, being able to control some of my business downsizing. I did that willingly and unwillingly. Number 1, attrition. Number 2, distance. And number 3, recessions. And all of those things combined caused a business to expire much more rapidly than I had anticipated, but still holding on to a few clients, and that I do into this very day. But my day is not so much on the computer. It is as a caregiver for my 93-year-old mother, which will be 93 in June. This was one of the unexpected things in life that I have not reluctantly, only in a sense that I saw her health decline with this dastardly word, medical term they call. Fortunately, when I moved here in 2013, it was a good year or two before I saw firsthand what dementia does. And I saw her decline. And over the next few years, I saw it go rapidly and then a stabilization in this last year or two. And for that, I'm very prayerfully thankful. So, in between all of that 40 years in New York, and then coming back to my more laid back community of Myersdale in 2013, I still had radio programs, and I did my best to spiritually grow. And that's a story in itself in my upbringing and where I came from and what I've experienced that led me to find in December, the last day or two in December of 2016, cry out, that seems appropriate, to God in frustration and simply stating that I was done. I examined many different aspects of my religious beliefs, and none of them were comfortable. And I wondered how much longer I could doubt these findings from various different religious experiences until I simply said, I'm done. All I wanted was the truth that Jesus, when he was in his ministry on earth, I had no knowledge that there was any kind of such record keeping, but all was lost. That was my prayer. And a simple prayer it was. And within 2 to 3 days, a website came across a computer, and then another, and then another, and then another. And then, as an independent soul of what we all are, and learning why we are and what our purpose here on life was, it resonated so much to my favor and my liking. It was just a natural. My soul was finally telling me, again, in hindsight, I've been trying to tell you this and show you this for years, but it took steps and it took ways of your independent thinking that it was you getting us to the point. But the soul had a helping hand, of course, in this. And in 3 or 4 years later, I've seen all of this. And in hindsight, again, I said, wow, could that have been way back when I was a youth and experienced that? And that could have been my soul telling me then, one day you'll learn the truth. And yes, one day came, but I was 9 years old then. Holy schmoly. Holy schmoly. There's other connotations of the word holy surrounding conversations that I have around the coffee table at times. And I tell the guys, what does that statement really mean? They say holy and then they add other expletives to it. So I'm always questioning how that becomes holy. And they know me, they know my curiosity. And that's the big C word in my vocabulary, not the medical term of a very nasty disease that takes so many lives. The C word in my vocabulary is curiosity. And because of that, as a youth of just, 2 years old, I have memories. I was curious. I didn't step on anybody's toes. In my humbleness and my independence, I refused to ask questions of who am I and why am I and where did I come from, because I did not have a father figure. I was born out of another terminal, came from out of wedlock. My goodness, is marriage a prison? wedlock. My goodness. Anyway, I'm just thinking again, and these modern thoughts that I have and curiosity, these terms come from. But yes, mother was a senior in high school, and I, again, have no chance for the circumstances in which I was born, but she worked at a department store in her senior year, and there was a delicatessen owner the next door over, of which convinced her to come work for him in the delicatessen. I can only count backwards from my November birth into about February. It must have been Valentine's celebration in this country in 1947. And I must have been conceived about that time. And I wonder, it was a little that my soul made the decision to come into this young lady's life and be a part of that fetus. Wow. It took me 69, maybe in 70th year, when the messages I was reading said the purpose of life is to quality. That's pretty strong words. You mean without living important in the creator's world and individuality, and that I'm like a snowflake and I'm only one of a kind, everyone else is different? That just totally amazes me as I think about it. How many billions have lived on Earth? How many experiences they had? Mine is not that terrifically different, but I know some ask in my interviews, what changed you? Where did you become this curiosity seeker that took all those years of fumbling with other religious dogmas and creeds before you came to this miraculous, if you want to call it that, seeking in that late day in December of 2016? Well, it was my sincere prayer, my earnest prayer that I was seeking that I never had before, apparently. And I've learned my creator does answer prayer, but I have to be the one really sincere in asking. And that's how it came about. After that, on those websites, I lurked. That's one of the favorite terminologies of a dear friend. I lurked for a year. I didn't say anything to anybody. I just examined and listened and heard and read the pageant messages and other books. And the website that I constantly refer to is a dear friend now, George. No. Jeff. No. Jeff. Jeoff. He's corrected me at times. And that's with the Jeoff. And that was early on. That website has totally amazed me because I controlled some websites. I knew how difficult it was. And here is this humongous, at the time, 3,000 page approximate web page about divine love. Divine love, and not only the pageant messages, but other publications that were recommended. And I had already read some of them publications, and the form of spiritualism in some respects and spiritualists in others. And here I was totally comfortable. I was able to assemble things in my life that were not so opposed to one another. The spirit world always intrigued me. Is it so? Can it really be? The churches I grew up in were Protestant, if you will, general Christianity, if you will, but I don't have any memory of church other than Catholic church when I attended with my cousins when I was a youngster, with all those tales of the nasty nuns and the smacking of fingers and punishments were being announced now and then. I can avow that that was so. And that church is only a stone's throw from where I'm sitting right now. I had that experience, but then my mother married a man, took us to Baltimore, Maryland for a year or so. And I realized at that young age, it was not, a man in my life that I would call father. It was just a man with my mother. And she was now going to give birth to a youngster 4 years younger than I. That's my brother Don. And he took the name different from mine. Mine was from my mother's maiden name. And yet I never asked what the A for Alexander, my middle name, where that name came from, or ask questions. Remember, I'm independent and don't want to know what other than what I want to know. And stubbornly, I went through life many years before I realized that there was a father, a figure, personage that was not really involved in my life, but caused my life, at least the embryo, to grow. And that later, and that story is a twisted story that will set some people on a trail. And since I'm jumping ahead and I'm a nonfiction and a fiction storyteller, I could say that this story germinated actual and factual. It ended up that this gentleman, call him that with respect, came back to the community after all those years. And I was about 16, 17 at the time. And he and his wife had a daughter that came a few months before them because school, they were attending school and didn't want to take her out of one and another. So she was here a few months before they actually moved back. Ended up in this small community, everybody is friends with friends. And that girl was a dear friend and someone new on the block. And I was with other friends, and before I knew it, my mother had a with me as I came in from an activity, and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "The kids, we're all going up to the falls. We're going swimming." Now, then was about to run out and up the stairs, and she broke down crying and told me the story that this new girl on the block was my half sister, that it was indeed her dad that was my dad. At 17 years old, I still refused to ask questions. I did not have a father figure, and now I do. The only one that I call father is our Heavenly Father and Creator. Oh, there's a lot of meat to the story in between all of that goings on, and I'm never, ever taking anything for granted anymore. For where I am now, I have a lot of baggage that still needs to be unloosened, and I need a lot of doors closed. But I am so thankful to know that what we call sin or incrustations of the soul has a way to be managed now. And there is not a prayer goes by that I look for that forgiveness and a way to disperse those incrustations, of which many messages in the pageant years of 100 years ago, those special messages, call them barnacles, just like on a ship, how attached they are and how difficult they are to remove. And I did have a boat, so I do know that problem. So that's my story in a roundabout of how I have been in life, but many things in being in my own business and having radio, having business associates and organizations, all of this is for naught if it wasn't for one main aim. I've met people, I accepted their ideas, I became associated with religious groups and always seeking and searching and reading. And that was my inspiration. And though it was in error, and I felt the error of many different church services from youth, after being a Catholic tag-along, but not a member, I had my mother remarry. I did not have her marry. She took it on her own when I was 9 years old. And at 9 years old, we started going to church. And of all things, it was a Mennonite church. Now, those familiar with the Amish community, it's a step or two away from the Quakers, and they drove cars. They're only blue or black, but they drove cars and they had electricity in their homes and they had automobiles. So that was okay. But soon after that, the branches broke away and became a Brethren church. That's what my stepfather and my mother were members of. And to this day, I send a donation to that church on behalf of Mom and her inability to attend. So there was Brethren, and then there was Presbyterian. And yes, I even preached a couple sermons in my wife's upbringing church, Presbyterian on Long Island. I've taught Bible school. I've done Sunday school. So all of that stuff, even portrayed Jesus in a cantata or plays at times. And wow, all of that stuff turned out to some really nice presentations in my later years. So any questions for me that I did not address here, I welcome them. Now, I feel like an interviewer of life, of many thousands of interviews, with the tables turned on me this morning, this time, but I'm here and willing to be an open Brooke book.
Well, that's delightful to hear, Brooke. And we are happy that we get to be the ones that interview you, one of the few in your life, apparently. So I'm just delighted to hear what you've shared with us. Everything brought you to this time, and I love your curiosity. I too am very curious and very optimistic. So life is just a joy, isn't it? When you have that curiosity, and you have it with an uppercase C, so awesome. So Beth and I do have our questions. Beth, do you want to start?
Well, I when you started, Brooke, and thank you for that. That was lovely, because I don't know you very well, and I've learned an awful lot about you today. But I think you mentioned in the beginning so much about your soul, and I'm quite interested in that, because did you actually have a knowledge of your soul when you were younger? Was this something that happened through your religious experiences, or has that happened recently?
The soul word was used in all religions as along with the body and soul. The soul word was used a lot, but never explained what it was. And yes, that was a big curiosity. Is a soul a heart? They say many times, heart and soul. And that was a curiosity that was only kind of answered for me maybe 2 years ago. We even use such terminology in the divine love and messages, praying with all your heart and soul. Well, most of the messages say your soul. So the soul is in a certain area of the body. And I found out a message about 2 years ago. It said the heart is encased within the soul. Wow. Never thought of it that way. But when you pass into spirit, does that heart still go with the soul and the spirit body? Is the heart and soul one or the other? And so this is in hindsight again, soul. Where did I start thinking about soul? It was a very word in making a very big decision in a radio program that I sponsored for a couple years, and I co-authored a book with a dear friend from another 7-year itch, I call it, of being in a Old and New Testament church, Jewish law-keeping church called the Worldwide Church of God with Herbert W. Armstrong. He had TV presence. I latched on to the Plain Truth magazine, and what was said seemed to be comforting, even though it was quite opposite of my peaceful tone, this man come on and he just talked real strong with his beliefs. And I said, wow, if he's that strong, I want to know more. Anyway, friends over that 7-year period. And again, my soul told me that was not the true spot for me to be in.
Mhm.
And within a year of my departure from that church, it broke apart. It broke up into pieces. They started admitting their error. And when they did, there was a lot of people that decided they don't like the new way. Even though it was still an error, they admitted, and they were so fragmented at that time, they dispersed, and there was very little presence of that organization, to my knowledge, anymore in the world. However, a friend contacted me during my being on the outside, him still being on the inside, and he said, Brooke, I had a revelation this morning while I was in the kitchen. I'd like you to come out to the house and talk about it with me. And I did. He said, I was in this kitchen and I had a presence and knowledge to say the book of Revelation is a total fraud. Well, you got my interest, Ken, I said. I couldn't stop laughing. I was trying to tell him for a couple years that I didn't feel comfortable with scripture. It is so filled with error. And he adamantly was a 50-year scholar of scripture and would refuse to listen to any conversation. He knew everything. And then for him to be telling me this.
It sounds as if
What
you've
would you like
had,
to do about that?
I'd say it sounds as if you've experienced so much in the way of soul perceptions, and that's brought you truth. And that's something which I think is a big part of
That
divine
book,
love and praying for
shamefully
divine love.
so, whatever. That book is still on Amazon, I believe. Revelation, the book of Revelation, a total fraud. It's a small published book of which my friend Ken spent some of his hard-earned money to go ahead and have it done. But the real thing with the soul word, we were telling people that this was in error, but we had nowhere else to tell them to go. We had a radio show that I probably hosted. I don't know the number anymore, but 50, 75, 100 shows, I guess, over 2.5, maybe 3-year period. Then one day I told him, I said, your listenership is very small. Book sales are almost nil to none. And we don't have any reason for them to listen to these words and telling them anything that is truth. Ken, I have one question for you, and this happened in 2017. After I've had a year with divine love and the messages, and I'm feeling so comfortable, I said, Ken, tell me about the soul. What do you mean? Do you have a soul? No. Wow. Ken, I said, this is where we part, not as friends, but in our understanding of the truth. And that is the big word soul. And in my life, that was where I made a definitive process of ending a radio program. I'm really not wanting to be associated with that book, but still, when you publish something, it's there and that's it. So the word soul, and now 4 years in the divine love path and knowing the soul existed long before I did, and the story of how we are predestined in some respects of what we plan to do. And we told God, I'll use the God word, saying we had a conversation with him before our soul decided to be part of who we've become. And I can only say that I imagine that some of us dedicated a life to the plan being worked out here on earth. And I'm very comfortable knowing that I must have had that curiosity and said, I'm in. And this is my story of why I feel so comfortable with the truth and the contemporary messages. There are some who do not like contemporary messages. They do want to stick with the written word of 100 years ago. And that is fine. I've learned not to prejudge. However, I feel sad that they are not keeping up with the modern day messages of today and where we are going. And James Patton himself being part of those contemporary messages. My initials are BAF, BAF. It just baffles me that some people don't accept change in this respect. Okay, I've said my piece on that. That's about as controversial as I get in this interview.
Well, each one of us is a unique person on our unique path. So wherever they are at this point, they'll move along somehow. It could be that you're going to write a sequel to that book.
You recovered that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I look forward to reading the sequel to your book, and then your name will be associated with something much, much different. So tell me how. Well, so Divine Love you discovered it. Pardon?
Oh, no, but I did want to interject that we're all suffering from internet choppiness. So I'm catching some of your words and losing some of the other, and there are some delays. And that's just signs of the times that we're in. And I suffer with some hearing loss, and that's why I keep my headphones on to pick up those sounds that I miss through a regular speaker. Now, you were saying, Lorraine?
What part didn't you hear? Let's see.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, you've talked about divine love, which is God's love. So you discovered that in 2017 after basically saying, I'm done with all this search that's not resulting in something I need. And then in 2000, and you took about a year before you revealed yourself. So since then, what's changed in your life?
Well, my writing genre has changed dramatically. I was not a writer. I did not excel in school in that category of English. However, in 2005, on a return trip to my hometown, I had my son. He is a Brooke Jr. He was going to be a Brooke, if a boy or a girl. We had Brooke late in life. I was 42. The wife was 43. And so he was 14 years old at the time and brought a neighbor along with him back to our hometown. And it was 10 o'clock at night in a deserted, lonesome area of a back road that I am very comfortable in traveling. And I stopped the car and I turned off the lights. And as dads want to do is scare the boogers out with a story. Out of the top of my head, come up with a scary story of when I was seen and I came down this very road and I saw a house. And I asked this neighbor boy, Eric, I said, Eric, did you by chance see lights on in a house back there? He said, oh, yeah. I said, I was afraid of that. It's about time I tell you a story. And I related that story in 2005, and it was August. 10 p.m. at night. 2 years later, 2007, my son I'm waiting for him to get out of school. I'm parked under big old oak trees in a beautiful setting of Long Island, where he went to high school, his final 2 years. And I penned some words and became a self-published short story. And it was called The Blue Goose and the Mist House. And I put it on eBay and it started selling, especially to those folks who knew of the Blue Goose, an old train that ran tracks through our community, would bring children into the school each day and take them home at night. And during this time, there was a house. It was an old house then. And when I was 16, I came down from my great grandfather's farm and I saw lights on in that house. And I knew there was no electricity in that house. It was not lived in years. And yet it vanished. And I asked my grandfather about that. Well, in that story, I had a chapter 1 done. I sent it to a cousin, one of those Catholic cousins that I went along with. And he was 4 years older than I. And I shared that first chapter, and he shot back an email while I'm under them oak trees in that beautiful setting in Long Island. He said, Pop never ever told me that story. And I realized then, if he believed what I was saying, that I would continue on with the chapters. And I did. And the book did sell on eBay, and that was in 2007. I became a self-published author at age 60 years old, and I never had the inclination that I'd ever write a book. And with that, 2010, I'm still on Long Island. It's December, and this format called Fiverr, Fiverr, Fiverr.com comes on board. I've just gone through another recent or two with my business, and income was being lost from a few big accounts. And I thought I need to make up something of this loss. And this Fiverr says anything you can do, sell it for $5 and more. And I started writing short stories. Short stories of 500 words, 1,000 words for $5 to $25. Send your name, whatever you want to say in the story, of where you live, a time of year, and I started writing stories. I got so backlogged. I became the #1 top seller within 90 days. And for 5 years, I wrote thousands and thousands of short stories that went around the world. Now, in answer to what changed, once divine love entered in my soul, for my sincere asking, the genre of my writing became more spiritual. And there's hardly a fiction or a nonfiction piece that don't have a little bit of both, that there is not a story of divine love mixed in with it. Planting seeds. That's what I do. I plant seeds, thankful that those with bigger knowledge are able to fill in the blanks from the spiritual realms into the minds of those who pick up those seeds, because I cannot proselytize. I've learned my lesson to try to convince of anybody against their will. And that's the other part of life, free will, that I had to come to understand. It would, as most people, aggravate people if they say something against the other person's belief and they start an argument. That's not me. But now it is totally me. I can very easily accept what your belief is. Just letting me introduce a few things of my belief, and we part as good company and friends for what could be eternity if they just listen to what I have to say. If I could get the last word in. So that's been my journey. And we all have this pride, I guess, before a fall. Well, my fall happened a number of years ago in various ways. And I can't say I don't have any pride. I still do, but in a much more a spiritual way. Let's put it that way. I'm thankful that I was given the opportunity to be a part of the growth of divine love in the short 4 years with the advent of my interest as a youth and up through my career being in radio. And I often wonder what made me stretch my wings. Angels don't have wings, by the way, but in my wings, I wanted to ask Al in the worst way when I interviewed him, do you think we could have a channeling on the air? Well, the courage came because it was aired. It wasn't totally me. And when I asked, he said, well, I don't know. Maybe we could try. And a little bit of silence. And sure enough, a channeled message on radio. That was in 2017, 2018. And that was part of Divine Love Video, which there are some episodes online through the talk show format. And then in 2018 it was, and the Zoom technology came along.
Yeah.
And though I say I have a face for radio and not for TV, here's TV and radio combined. And then the online circle of light. Do you think that would work? And we tried it, and we have what we have today in 2 years, even in the last 1 year. How many programs have sprouted on Zoom, inspired by the gifts of the Divine Love Path followers? Of course, you and Beth, Lorraine are two of those. Vaughn, sorry I missed you today. A fellow Pennsylvanian there in central Pennsylvania.
Yeah, having power problems today.
Yeah.
So many
And
things in common are still unique, and we have something.
talking about Zoom, I wouldn't be here, Brooke, if it wasn't for Zoom. I mean, I found Divine Love community and through Zoom, and so I shall be forever grateful.
Yeah. Zoom and the pandemic are a blessing in
They
disguise.
have been, haven't they? Yes.
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 Well,
in that
our
sense.
time is running
Okay.
short. Beth,
And-
you always have one final question for us.
I
Let's
do.
pose it
I ask everybody this. Divine love brings us what? Love, light, and joy, Brooke. And I always ask, what brings you joy in life?
Well, we started that mentioning in the beginning of the program when I mentioned that I'm a caregiver for my mother, a full-time caregiver. 4 hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday that I have some come in and watch mom while I go out and do some of my things. And to see her, to be able to stabilize and know that prayer has worked in her life multiple times in her falls and stays, in her hospice stays. Sharing the prayer is what brought mom out of hospice, not because hospice doesn't treat, they're there to comfort. And they did a wonderful job in that. But when they saw me trying to do things for mom that I normally would do, and I fully expected her to be able to help me do some of those things in maneuvering her into a bathroom, for example, and not having to wheel her in, where the attendants at hospice, they would wheel her in or bring something to the bedside. And when they saw that within 7 days, I asked the question, she could be released. And the doctor said, at times people come into hospice and at times, very rare, they can be released. They were waiting for me to make that decision, and I did. So I've experienced it. She's talking. I wonder if I can do this. For her to be alert over there in the chair,
Yes.
and that is my joy. Now it gets a little tight sometimes in building your patience along with joy. there are some times and some circumstances, almost weekly, and on a certain moment, I might be doing something, and it's very, very easy to switch to be flipped, and you lose patience. So every time I do that, I chuckle to myself forcefully sometimes and say how blessed I am. That's my joy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Brooke.
That
That's
is,
lovely.
wow,
It's a lovely end.
it is. Thank you so much for being with us, Brooke. Thank you, Beth. And I hope that everyone who gets to see this video is affected and picks up one of those seeds, Brooke. Thank you
Yes.
so much. Bye.
That
Thank you,
would bring
Brooke.
me that other great joy. Thank you, you two angels in the making.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. God bless you. Goodbye.
Bye.